an emotional story it has been for he and his family.
Now I want to introduce you to Landrey Eargle.
Landrey's story went viral.
My daughter is too sick to hold and too sick to talk to.
God came through one more time for us, and he showed up in the hands and the feet of other people.
I was actually in journalism school there at University of Memphis, and I was doing a paper on how does college football affect your life. So I called to do the interview with his roommate, and Joshua answered the phone. And of course, if you've heard Joshua for any length of time, he's an amazing voice. And I said, well, okay, are you a football player? And he said, yes. I said, well, how has college football affected your life? And he said, it's brought me closer and closer to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And we talked on the phone for a few weeks and finally decided to meet up at my church. It became the church we were married in. I remember growing up dreaming of being a sports reporter, sideline reporter during college football. I wanted it more than anything else in this world. It was my passion. I thought about it every day. I worked on it as much as you could work on anything at home.
Before we get started, let's send it down to the sidelines and visit with Kristen Eargle.
They said the key to this one is going to come down to who wins that turnover battle. Tennessee Tech head coach
It was an
Dwayne
appointment,
Alexander said,
and I had a doctor's appointment. I was 9 weeks along, and they were doing an ultrasound just to check on everything, and they couldn't find the heartbeat at that point. So they did another type of ultrasound, and they saw a halo around Landry's head. And she said, I'm seeing something around your baby's head, and usually that's a significant issue. And she just kind of held my hand, and for her to do that, I knew that there was going to be significant challenges. It was appointment after appointment after appointment of, we're not exactly sure. Now it's a congenital heart defect. Now you're going to have surgery right away.
When Landry was born, they took Landry, they took her into a side room, just kind of through the doorway there, and they told me previously I could go in there with them. And I just remember it being silent. I was like, wait a minute, that baby's supposed to be screaming at me.
That's the first thing I said. She's not crying. She's not crying. She's not crying. And I knew she wasn't okay. I said, go back there. Go back with her. And he goes back and watches her. And obviously they are starting a manual ventilator on her because she wasn't able to breathe. I think that what shook me up the most, where she had been through open heart surgery, and we thought that everything was fine when she came out. They said, hey, everything looks good. It went according to plan. 24 hours later, she coded. 12 hours after that, she coded. And I asked the nurse at one point, I said, what is she doing? She looks like she's gagging. And the nurse said, she's crying. And she was in so much pain that the painkillers couldn't do anything about it. And I realized that she could tune out all these physicians' voices and all the nurses that were around her. But when I spoke, she wanted to be near me, and she knew the sound of my voice. And I just wanted to hold her, and she was so sick. She was fighting to stay alive. And I sat there and I realized my daughter is too sick to hold and too sick to talk to. And I thought, what am I supposed to do? Now I can't even advocate for her. Now I can't even talk to her. I can't pray out loud for her. And I had to get completely silent. And I remember sitting there, mentally praying to God or whispering so that she can't hear me. Okay, you've got my complete attention. She comes home from the hospital, and for the span of 4 years, she never went more than 12 weeks without becoming critically ill in my arms at home.
We get to that 6.5-year point, Landry finally gets diagnosed, and it's not really a diagnosis. It got to the point where they had ran so many tests and crossed basically every known disorder out. That they took Kristen and myself's blood and took Landry's blood. They started going line by line through her DNA. And they get to this gene we all have called CSNK2B. And that gene's out of order. Some T's were duplicated, and it has triggered Landry to deal with what she deals with. That was a monumental moment from the point where we just got down on our knees and started praying and believing the only way we knew how to believe.
It was then that I learned that God is the author of her days. And I go, okay, God, you are going to have to orchestrate the next step, and you have to line it up, and you have to be my source because I can't do this. All of a sudden, I went from a journalist and to going, wow, I feel like a nurse. I'm not prepared for this.
What Landry's really taught us walking through all those is just that God is who he says he is, that he is always going to be there for us. He's not going to leave us or forsake us. We got to a point at 6.5 years into Landry's life where it was like, we felt like we've done everything we can. We've stretched at every dollar. I'm very, very, very blessed to have good jobs with great insurance. Awesome. Didn't cover it all. There's so many times Landry's going to the hospital, and so many medicines, and there's so many visits. It's like, all right, well, we're pulling from this and that. God, there's nothing else to pull from. That became the biggest strain, was the financial burden. I mean, God, we're going to do everything you tell us to do. We're trusting you. We're leaning. We're rocking with you, man. Whatever you want to do for Landry. God came through one more time for us, and he showed up in the hands and the feet of other people. All we did is share Landry's story through an article, and all of a sudden, we saw how big God was, and that he can pull resources from anywhere he wants to pull resources from.
There's a look at offensive line coach Joshua Eargle for Austin Peay, and what an emotional story it has been for he and his family, and how the college football world has rallied around young Landrey Eargle.
Now I want to introduce you to Landrey Eargle. The daughter of a Govs assistant coach has beaten the odds for nearly 6 years, thanks to a support system that's growing by the day.
The goal was set at $40,000. However, Landry's story went viral, and it's now raised more than $150,000.
That people that will never know or even be able to think, just watch God show more time and completely erase that stress or that mountain that was in front of us. God just wiped it off. He said, no, I got this. I'm bigger than that too. I've got Landry. I've got financial stuff. Don't worry about that. And he just showed up and he said, listen, I'm going to take care of that little bitty girl.
The Rare Disease Champion Award, presented by Uplifting Athletes, goes to Josh Eargle.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate how the Maxwell Football Club has really rallied around and told the story of a little girl.
I think it was a dream of ours for a long time. All the bills piling in, I thought I would just love to one day have a nonprofit that we could help somebody and they wouldn't feel what we're feeling. Here we are, able to start something called Ruler of Hope, just to provide support for medically fragile children. Just a way to be able to share joy and hope through adversity and to tell someone they're not alone. We realize that joy is a choice you make in the middle of battle when it makes no sense to smile. God is our source. So she requires a lot of care. She needs us to do pretty much everything for her. But one thing she does do is she worships Jesus. If you put on some worship music, she will praise a little wilder than you. She gets down on it. She loves it. She'll get up early and she's going to do her wild arms for Jesus. She loves to worship, and everybody around her knows that.
It's unbelievable how a little girl who says less than 10 words, that probably no one else understands but Kristen and I and her 2 siblings, can preach the greatest sermon every single day when she walks into the room. When I'm approached, and with Landry, sometimes people come to us and they ask, well, how do you deal with that? Many times I say it's no different than how you deal with the adversities in your life. And when you find yourself at the end of your rope, all I knew to do was get on my knees and seek Jesus. You don't have a Landry, but you got something. And I'm telling you, Jesus is big enough to handle whatever it is. And you don't have to do anything but turn to him. That's all you've got to do.